Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. On the programme this week, US pushes for Gaza peace deal as UN Security Council adopts resolution for ceasefire, plus thousands flee Sudan's El Fasher as deadly clashes intensify. On a mission to end Israel's 8-month assault on Gaza, mediators from Qatar, Egypt and the United States have been attempting to negotiate a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas for months. The latest resolution welcomes a 3-phase ceasefire proposal announced by the United States President last month. The United Nations Security Council backed a plan on Monday for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. It's the plan US President Joe Biden outlined on May the 31st, aimed at ending the 8-month-long war.
We can help bring about peace by adopting the resolution before us, which calls on Hamas to take the ceasefire deal and urges both parties to fully implement the deal's terms without delay and without conditions. Colleagues, today this council sent a clear message to Hamas. Accept the ceasefire deal on the table. Israel has already agreed to this deal, and the fighting could stop today if Hamas would do the same. I repeat, the fighting could stop today.
The plan, welcomed by Israel, involves an initial 6-week ceasefire, with Hamas releasing some hostages in exchange for Israel releasing an undefined number of Palestinian prisoners.
The loss of life in Gaza is a tragedy. But if you don't put the blame on Hamas, you're advancing their strategy. Colleagues, Israel stands firm on our principles, and they have not changed. We will continue until all of the hostages are returned and until Hamas' military and governing capabilities are dismantled. These have been our goals from day one. Just as President Biden stated on May 31st, Hamas must not stay in power. Israel will not let Hamas rearm or regroup so that Gaza can pose a threat to Israel. This is the unwavering goal that we are determined to achieve.
Hamas also welcomed the adoption of the US-drafted resolution, saying it's ready to cooperate with mediators over implementing the plan's principles.
Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday in Israel.
World leaders at a conference on humanitarian aid for Gaza in Jordan called on both Israel and Hamas to back the ceasefire proposal, saying it's the best way to alleviate suffering.
It's high time for a ceasefire, along with the unconditional release of hostages. I welcome the peace initiative recently outlined by President Biden and urge all parties to seize this opportunity and come to an agreement. And I call on all parties to respect their obligations under international humanitarian law. This includes facilitating the delivery of humanitarian aid both into and inside Gaza, as they have committed. Ultimately, the solution to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is political. The only way forward is through a political solution that opens a path to sustained peace based on 2 states, Palestine and Israel, living side by side in peace and security on the basis of the pre-97 lines and the relevant United Nations resolutions, previous agreements and international law, with Jerusalem as capital of both states.
The Palestinian civilians suffering in Gaza, we know they're not numbers, they're not abstractions. They're human beings, they're children, they're women, they're men, who all want the same things that we want for ourselves and for our loved ones. Most of Gaza's sanitation system has been destroyed. Fewer than a dozen of Gaza's 40 hospitals are open. And, as we know and have heard, more than 270 humanitarian workers have been killed. The single most effective step we can take to address the urgent humanitarian challenges in Gaza is to reach an immediate and ultimately enduring ceasefire.
Negotiators from the US, Egypt and Qatar have been trying to hash out a ceasefire for months. Hamas says it wants a permanent end to the war in Gaza and Israeli withdrawal from the enclave of 2.3 million people. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has acknowledged his war cabinet has authorized the plan, but far-right members of his cabinet have threatened to quit his coalition and trigger its response if the deal goes forward, seeing it as a surrender to Hamas. Israel is retaliating against Hamas, which rules Gaza, over the October the 7th attack by its militants. More than 1,200 people were killed and over 250 taken hostage, according to Israeli tallies. Since then, more than 37,000 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli assault, according to Gaza health authorities. United Nations experts have warned against collective punishment for the people of Gaza. And over to Ukraine, several waves of attacks in the Kharkiv region over the past few weeks have led to more civilian deaths and injuries, including among children. With the worsening security situation, aid agencies say humanitarian needs in the region are growing. These are civilians displaced by the recent attacks in the northeastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. Most of the evacuees who had to escape their homes with only a few belongings are already highly vulnerable and include mainly older people and those with low mobility or disabilities who were not able to flee earlier. Many describe living through days of intense bombardment.
Testimonies gathered by the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine highlight the terrifying impact on civilians of the recent escalation in hostilities in the northeast of the country, where Russian armed forces have seized control of several villages. People who have fled from these areas along the Kharkiv region frontline described having to shelter for days in cold, dark basements with no electricity amid intense aerial bombardment, strikes by drones and missiles, and artillery shelling. There's been massive destruction of people's homes and other civilian infrastructure. Entire communities have been uprooted and destroyed, with more than 10,000 people displaced to date.
UNHCR is concerned that conditions in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, which is already hosting some 200,000 internally displaced people, could become even more difficult if the ground offensive and relentless aerial attacks continue. This could force many people to leave Kharkiv for safety and survival, seeking protection elsewhere.
Since the start of Russian Federation full-scale invasion of Ukraine, on average, 200 ambulances per year are damaged or destroyed in shelling attacks. That is tremendous loss, depriving the Ukrainian people of urgent care. 10 million people are estimated to suffer from some sort of mental health conditions, and with more than 20,000 amputations conducted since Russian Federation full-scale invasion in 2022, these are two areas need support from many humanitarian and development partners and in long term.
Ukraine's Kharkiv and the surrounding region have long been the targets of Russian attacks, but recently the strikes have become more intense, hitting civilians and the region's energy grid. Russia denies deliberately targeting civilians, but thousands have been killed and injured during its invasion of Ukraine.
The civilian toll of attacks on Ukraine has continued to mount. Few parts of the country are spared from these hostilities, particularly in the east and south. But an escalation in fighting in the Kharkiv region since the 10th of May has had the heaviest impact. Shopping centers, homes, educational establishments, shops, office buildings, parks, and public transport have all been struck in recent weeks. At least 18,100 people in the Kharkiv region have been newly displaced, according to estimates by the International Organization for Migration. Civilians who remain in border and frontline areas in Kharkiv face dire conditions. Many are cut off from access to food, medical care, electricity, and gas. Elderly people are disproportionately affected because they are often unable or reluctant to leave their homes. In northern Kharkiv, where the fighting is heaviest, more than half of those killed or injured have been over the age of 60.
On Monday, the United States said that Russia's advance on the Kharkiv region had stalled. Washington recently gave Kyiv the green light to use US-supplied weapons in defending the Kharkiv region, despite concerns that authorizing those kind of strikes might drag NATO into a direct conflict with Russia.
По направлению у нас спорного.
The US President Joe Biden, who recently visited France, met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Paris, reiterating his support for the war-torn country.
The Ukrainian people have been incredibly brave, never given up, never staying, never even yielding, and it's impressive. And you saw the reception they received when everyone stood, gave you a standing ovation, and they deserve it. You deserve it. And you haven't bowed down, you haven't yielded at all. You continue to fight in a way that is just remarkable, And we're not going to walk away from you.
We are very thankful from all Ukrainians to your military support, financial support, humanitarian one, and of course it's very important. And our meeting here is very symbolic. It's very important that you stay with us. This bipartisan support with the Congress, it's very important that in this unity, United States, America, all American people stay with Ukraine. Like it was during World War II, how the United States helped to save human lives, to save Europe, and we count on your continuing support and standing with us, shoulder to shoulder. Thank you so much. And this big package, which been signed it and supported and voted, and it's very important. It's so necessary for the feeling of our people that we are not alone.
Russia's offensive in Kharkiv came as Ukraine was just beginning to receive new US military aid, with Moscow looking to exploit the delay of more weapons and defenses and take more ground before the assistance arrived in full force. Russian forces have made their most significant territorial gains in 18 months since the surprise ground assault against the Kharkiv region in early May, capturing several Ukrainian border villages and forcing thousands to flee their homes. However, forces are said to be still locked in fighting north of the city, including major battles around the town of Vovchansk. In Sudan, warring parties are waging a deadly battle for control of El Fasher, the capital of the state of North Darfur, and until recently, one of the last safe havens for civilians. If the city falls, experts warn there will be dire human rights consequences, ranging from ethnic cleansing to outright genocide for millions of people.
This is Zamzam camp for Sudanese refugees who have fled violence from El Fasher in Sudan's North Darfur region. The International Organization for Migration estimates that the conflict has displaced nearly 58,000 people from the region since April the 1st. Many more people, including children and elderly people, are unable or being prevented from moving to safer areas.
Our lives have been difficult. As you can see, we don't have anything, not even dinner to make for my kids. We came from Tawila. We had to leave at night. We could not leave during the day because we were scared of strikes and heavy weapons. They searched you and threatened us. They took all our belongings, leaving us with very little. And with that little money, we were able to get to the refugee camp here.
In central Darfur, acute malnutrition is estimated to be at 15.6% among children under 5, while in Zamzam camp it's close to 30%. Retaj is 7 years old. Her family fled their home in El Fasher amid ongoing attacks and horrific reports of violence.
Before the war, we used to play with friends, talk together. I came to Zamzam camp with my mother, brothers and uncles. My dad is back home. Our situation is bad. We don't have any money for food and water. At home, we would eat 3 meals. Here, we only eat 1 meal a day. Before, I wanted to become a doctor to treat sick people, but now I just want the war to stop.
Over 4 weeks of fighting in and around El Fasher, the capital of North Darfur, has killed more than 190 people and wounded 1,200, according to medical charity Doctors Without Borders. Doctors at one of the last functioning hospitals in the besieged city say they've been forced to close down the facility after it was attacked on Saturday. Home to more than 1.8 million residents and displaced people, El Fasher is the only city still under army control in the entire Darfur region and a key humanitarian hub for a region on the brink of famine.
You've seen people coming on a daily basis by dozens in a very, very bad shape. And most of them are women, children who have experienced unimaginable trauma.
For the UN, El Fasher is inaccessible either cross-line or cross-border. We have all seen the horrific news coming from the small village of Wad al-Noor. We are also hearing of truly horrifying reports of violent attacks and casualties in the villages of Wad al-Noor in Al Jazeera state. Some 12 million have been forced to flee their homes in Sudan, with over 2 million crossing borders into neighboring countries, mainly Chad, South Sudan, and Egypt, often arriving in extremely vulnerable conditions and highly traumatized.
The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor has appealed to witnesses to send evidence to aid an urgent investigation opened by his office into allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity.
I want to be clear. I don't want there to be any doubt that the information being collected by my office on a daily basis from Darfur seems to disclose an organized, systematic, and a profound attack on human dignity. And I believe, based upon the information we are receiving, that we are on the precipice of something even worse. The evidence my office has collected to date seems to show credible, repeated, expanding, continuous allegations of attacks against the civilian population, in particular, attacks directed against camps for internally displaced persons. It seems to show the widespread, prevalent use of rape and other forms of sexual violence. It seems to disclose consistently the shelling of civilian areas, the looting of properties, and attacks against hospitals. I am particularly concerned by the ethnically motivated nature of these attacks against the Masalit and other communities. This is a crisis by any benchmark that unfortunately seems to be accelerating, that seems to be deepening, that the suffering that's being endured is widening.
Against the backdrop of the ongoing war, humanitarian agencies are struggling to support everyone in need. Aid agencies warn food security is drastically deteriorating and could hit levels not seen in Sudan since the early 2000s.
The situation in Sudan is a catastrophe. The country is facing a hunger and malnutrition crisis. The World Food Programme is doing everything it can to scale its operation. We aim to reach up to 5 million people, but even that will not be enough. Unless we have access, and more importantly, unless there is an end to the conflict, we simply will not be able to reach all of the people who need support now.
The World Health Organization is also sounding the alarm over the dire health situation in the country.
The health system in Sudan is collapsing. About 65% of the Sudanese population lack access to healthcare. Healthcare in Sudan typically relied heavily on Khartoum, where the healthcare system was decimated. Only about 25% of the medical supplies needed are available in the country. In hard-to-reach areas, only 20 to 30% of health facilities remain functional, and even so at a minimal level.
Fighting between the Sudanese army and the RSF erupted in April 2023, killing around 14,000 people. That's according to the United Nations. Nearly 10 million people have been forced to leave their homes both inside and outside the African country, making Sudan the world's largest displacement crisis.
And finally on the programme, on a much lighter note, this achievement is not one to be sniffed at. Known as the typing man of India, Vinod Chowdhury has upped his game after practicing hard to beat his own record for fastest time to type the alphabet with his nose for a third time. Take a look.
44-year-old Vinod Chowdhury first claimed the title for fastest time to type with his nose in 2023 with a time of 27.8 seconds, getting his time down to 26.7 seconds later that year. And now he's smashed it again with a time of 25.66 seconds.
I saw someone typing with their nose in 2014, and after that I started practicing. So far, I have set 4 records in nose typing.
To successfully complete the record attempt, Vinod had to type out the Roman alphabet on a keyboard and had to type a space between each letter. Vinod, who works in the computer industry, also holds records for the fastest time to type the alphabet backwards with 5.36 seconds and the fastest time to type the alphabet with hands behind the back with 6.78 seconds. He says he practiced for hours to earn his world record, and typing with his nose would sometimes make him very dizzy. But he insists everything is possible with enough practice.
नोज से टाइपिंग करना एक बहुत ही मतलब मुश्किल काम है because जब आप
Typing with the nose is a very difficult task because during the typing you move your head here and there, and after you go home you will feel very dizzy. There is a lot of pressure in the eyes and in your head too. But if you have the courage and the willpower to do something different in the world, then you can also set a world record. I believe that no matter how many problems you face in your life, you have to keep your passion until eternity.
The dad of 4 says his dream is to help bring worldwide attention to his home country and is now doing his bit by breaking as many world records as possible.
And that's the programme today, but remember our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. Bye for now.